All right. So for today, we are going to be talking about some things on IELTS Part 1 that you might come up against. And so for today, we're going to focus our attention on snacks, right? So we're going to focus on snacks today. And we really need to make sure that we're paying attention to a few things. We need to pay attention to our pronunciation, right? So notice it's ah in snacks. And for this, your mouth is going to go a little wide, ah, right? And those sounds are going to be very similar to what you see in apple or cat, right? Cat, lap, right? So these words all have that same ah sound. What I hear very often from students and from candidates that I've heard in the past, instead of saying snack, they say snake. And I don't think we want to usually be eating snakes. Okay, so a snake, AAA, is that sound here, right? So these are two very different sounds. This sound is going to come a bit lower, a bit higher in the mouth. So A, snake, A, right? Versus snack, which is going to take place a little bit lower than the other sound. Some examples of this include late, make, great, right? Stay, AA, right? So these types of things. And so we want to avoid this as much as we can. Now, if you were speaking to someone who is a native English speaker and they do not have anything to do with, for example, who is testing, they don't have anything to do with testing or English teaching. For example, if you go to study or work abroad into an English-speaking country, they will not know that some learners of English have this pronunciation problem. And so they will think that you are talking about snakes. And this kind of plays into different stereotypes we have about different cultures and the foods that they eat. So it is very important that we make sure we get this pronunciation correct, right? If you start telling your friends in other countries that you really love to eat snakes in the afternoon, you're going to have a very different reaction than if you say something like, I love to eat snacks in the afternoon. Okay, so this is just something we need to be careful of. Now, I have some questions that I want to share with you, and I'm just going to copy and paste them into our little Word document to make things easy for all of us. Okay, so we're going to start with a few questions and then make our way down. Now, put this back in big screen for you guys, right? So you should be able to see this list of questions. It looks like a lot, but we are just going to go through them a little bit at a time, okay? So we're going to start with this first question. Do you like snacks? And then do you enjoy eating snacks? Notice we have like and enjoy. These mean the same thing. It's just a different way of asking the same question, okay? Now, for this question, if you come up across it, for example, in IELTS Part 1, they like to sometimes ask questions about foods. And I'm sure you guys have seen like the practice questions where they're asking you like about snacks or about chocolates, I think is one that they usually have. and another one is ice cream and things like this. So when you have these, please do everyone a favor, including like your IELTS examiner, okay? And don't just memorize a set of answers for one type of question, for example, about chocolate, because what we'll see is a lot of people will come through and you'll ask them a question very similar to, do you like snacks? And they will say something like, yes, I love chocolate. That's great, okay? I know the majority of people I encounter love chocolate. I love chocolate, okay? But we can say other things here, right? We don't have to just memorize a set of answers for one specific type of topic. Instead, you could make a list of snacks that you enjoy. For example, instead of saying, yes, I love chocolate, right? We could start with making a list of snacks that you like. For example, dried fruit, right? Dried fruit is a great snack choice. And I'm not spelling right. There we go. Dried fruit. If you are someone, particularly from the north of China, you might enjoy latia. You can say this on like the IELTS exam. That is fine. In fact, it will be way more interesting than the examiner constantly hearing things about chocolate. All right. Dried fruit, latte. Let's do chips, as the Americans would say, like myself. Or if you prefer to adapt things from the UK, you could, of course, say crisps. There are no negatives to either choice. You could even say you like baozi, but because there is an English equivalent for baozi, I might suggest instead that you use the term steamed buns, right? Those would be all perfectly fine and acceptable answers. Now, let's try to make some of these into affirmative answers or positives, okay? So an affirmative or positive answer is going to be one that probably starts with yes. And this is absolutely fine, but don't just say, yes, I like snacks. Oh God, please no. Instead, say something like, yes, or yeah, I really enjoy eating snacks throughout the day, okay? And this is a longer answer, and it also allows people that are listening to you to notice that you can use some longer words like throughout accurately, and it really helps give us more to your answer rather than, yeah, I like snacks. All right, we need more than that, especially in something like an IELTS exam. Now, do remember that these are usually questions you're going to encounter in an IELTS Part 1. And in IELTS Part 1, if you've studied for it and you've read all of the different books that they have for these things, you'll know that they always tell you there's a very limited amount of time for IELTS Part 1. And that's okay. That's fine. In fact, that's perfect, because what you can do is you can continue to talk. And when the examiner interrupts you, they'll ask you another question, and then you answer that question and do it long as well. And this tells people that you can speak for a long time fluently. And even if it's not fluently, you can keep going. And that is only ever going to be a positive thing. Do not be afraid when you get interrupted during an exam. That means that you took all the time that they had for that question, and that's perfect. You want that, okay? So let's make this answer a little bit longer for us. So we have, yes, I really enjoy eating snacks throughout the day. I usually, and usually is an adverb of frequency, and we want to be using these. However, we need to make sure that we are pronouncing usually correctly. So sometimes, I'm not really sure why, both students and some candidates I've encountered have had trouble with this word, usually. And they'll sometimes not pronounce the j sound here where the S is, and they'll just skip it, and they'll say usually. And that's not right, ever. So what we're going to do is we need to practice for this word specifically, making a j sound. All right, so this S is not S, no, it's j, usually, okay? When you need to practice making a sound, for example, like j, you need to practice by making the sound longer when you are giving the word a try and trying to make sure you're pronouncing the sound. So even though it might sound silly when you're doing practice with other people or practicing by yourself to make that long sound, it's very important because you're bringing attention to the sound, and we need this attention to the sound to make sure that we're making the sound correctly. I highly recommend when you're answering questions for any of the IELTS parts, you, like within your own practice and your own studies for the IELTS exam, you go ahead and you record yourself. And I hate personally that advice because I hate listening to my own voice. So for example, this live stream, I'm recording it. I'm going to have to watch it later to see how I can improve, and I'm going to hate it, okay? Because I have to listen to my own voice. So even if you hate listening to your own voice, when you're studying for a language exam, you need to hear yourself and compare it to the sound that it should be making, okay? So for this, I usually eat, so let's take latia, right? I usually eat latia in the afternoons after I finish my last class, but before I eat dinner, okay? This is a nice sentence. We have that but there that's kind of joining these two sentence parts together. That is fantastic. That's going to let anybody who's grading an exam you're taking in speaking to know that you are able to create more than just simple basic sentences, right? We need this and we want this when we're taking a speaking exam, all right? Now, usually if you say something like this, the examiner is going to stop you and they're going to move on. So let's take a look at what our next sentence would be, and we'll come down here and I'll grab it, right? And I'm going to take the whole note that I have for myself because we need to look at this. So let's just go down a little to make sure that you can see it fine. We have the question, how often do you eat snacks? Do you eat snacks often? Okay, let's make a negative sentence for this one. A negative is probably going to start with no, right? So the really basic answer is no, I don't often eat snacks. Or sometimes I hear an even more basic answer, which is no, I don't eat snacks. And that's fine, but it's not good, and it's definitely not great, okay? So what we are going to do is we're going to pay attention to what we're saying here, and instead we're going to say something like, no, I don't really, which is a modifier in this case, right? I don't really enjoy eating snacks much. And notice, by our use of much here, we're avoiding repeating the word often. And that's great because synonyms mean that you have a decent vocabulary resource to rely on, and you understand how to use that vocabulary in different types of sentences. So instead of using often again, since it's in the question, instead use much, right? This is way better. So no, I don't really enjoy eating snacks much. I'm going to give you an example of what I hear quite often right up here, right? I'm trying to lose my weight. Is this right? This is not quite right, okay? We're going to take a look at this my here, right? I'm trying to lose my weight. My is something that tells people it is mine. I own it, right? For example, this is my water bottle. I drank from it. It is mine, right? However, weight does not need my, because we know it's yours. You can't lose someone else's weight. You know what I mean? So, for example, I could never say, oh, I'm trying to lose my husband's weight. How would that work? That's impossible, okay? So this my, kill it, all right? It's unnecessary. So instead, we're probably going to say, I'm trying to lose weight, right? Now, this is a very short sentence, and I think we should try to make it a bit longer. So, no, I don't really enjoy eating snacks much. I'm trying to lose weight, so I try my best to control what I eat, right? So, let's take a look at this. If you're trying to lose weight, there is something you're trying to do. You're trying to control what you eat. This is also called dieting, right? And we'll do it like this. It's also called dieting. Now, something I've noticed over my 5 years of teaching and then my few 1.5 years of examining, nobody likes to use the word diet, and I'm not sure why. It's kind of a missing lexical resource that I think we need when we're talking about weight, controlling what you eat, health in general. We need to be talking about diet and dieting, right? And this is to watch what you eat, or to only eat healthy foods. Oops. There. Okay. So dieting is to watch what you eat, or to only eat healthy foods. This is very important to lose weight, right? So specifically in China, I've noticed when people do want to lose weight and they are dieting, they like to reduce or stop eating meat altogether. Okay, so let's add this to our answer here. My favorite snacks used to be savory things like, savory things like, let's say like chicken, okay? Or beef jerky, okay? Like chicken or beef jerky. Beef jerky is dried beef. I've had really good dried yak, so that's also a type of jerky, right? So my favorite snacks used to be things like chicken or beef jerky, and those meat-based snacks are too unhealthy for me now that I'm dieting. Okay? This answer is nice, it's long, it has everything, right? It has everything we need for a good, healthy answer. So, somewhere probably, I would say, an examiner is going to stop you somewhere in the middle of this answer. But if you have very good word stress, and I'm talking If you have fantastic rhythm in what you're saying, you can probably get this whole answer out. And that would be good because it alerts whoever is proceeding over your exam. It tells them that you know words like beef jerky, diet, savory. That's really important as well. These are all things that we do not typically hear if someone is still struggling to learn the language well. So these are all great word choices, and I would highly recommend an answer like this. All right. Now, let's move on and let's take a look at what kind of snacks do you like, or what kind of snacks would you choose, right? So for this one, they're asking, what kind of snacks do you like? What kind of snacks would you choose? When they ask, would you choose, they're basically asking what snacks you would like, right? So now we have some words that we can look at here. We have healthy, or on the opposite end, unhealthy, right? Now, when we say this word, we need to make sure that we're pronouncing the TH correctly. So a TH sound is made usually by putting your tongue between your teeth and blowing wind. All right? So you're going to Now, to check that you are making this sound correctly, you're going to put your hands over your mouth. So tongue between your teeth. If you feel wind, great. You are making the TH sound. If you do not feel wind, you are most likely making an S sound, right? And that's going to sound like Notice there's no tongue between the teeth for the S sound, and that is wrong here. So we want to make sure, again, that we're recording ourselves and we're listening to make sure that we're creating these sounds correctly. All right? Now, we have healthy, and unhealthy, right? We could also take a look at certain words, for example, that end in Y. And words that end in Y, I'm just going to move this out a little, they can be modified by this Y. And this lets us play with different words. For example, we could look at the word salt, and then if we add Y, it's salty. And that can be used to describe foods that have a lot of salt. So used to describe foods with a lot of salt. Okay? Now, we also can do a word like meat. We could add a Y there and make it meaty. And this is a food that is very savory and or has a lot of meat, right? So we can go on with these. I want to later on today around 8 p.m. have another live stream with you guys, and there we're going to talk about foods and meals and some other different word choices, and that's going to be more specifically looking at a longer term for IELTS Part 2 and helping you with that. And that will be more where we're going to focus on these adjectives and modified words to talk about food. But still, these are great choices. Let's look at these for now, right? So what kind of snacks would you choose? I usually, and in fact we use usually already, so let's choose a different word. Let's try this adverb of frequency, typically. Typically is an adverb of frequency that I don't hear much from candidates or from students, and I think we should be using it more. So I typically just means usually, all right? So I typically prefer, instead of like or enjoy, which we had a few questions ago, we're going to use the word prefer. Prefer means like or enjoy. I typically prefer to eat foods that are very salty, and maybe even savory. Okay? This is doing a few things actually that I really like. If I got this answer, typically, great. No one ever uses typically. And I understand why, because when I was teaching English in Chongqing at Chongqing University of Technology a few years ago, when we taught adverbs of frequency, typically wasn't one that was usually used, right? So I don't think students are getting enough exposure to different types of adverbs of frequency. For example, like this one, typically. So that is already great to hear. And then to hear a candidate or a student use the word prefer instead of like or enjoy, again, signals that they have good command over their lexical choices. And that just means they have good command over their vocabulary and they understand what their words mean and they are using them correctly. That's fantastic. Next, we have, I typically prefer to eat foods that are that are very salty and maybe even savory, right? So maybe even is going to be a bit more advanced in a sentence because it's kind of hard to know when to use this. It's just saying I might sometimes like something savory. So maybe even something savory, right? Okay, I can make the fonts bigger. Let's go and we'll do it here. Bump it up, and then I'll even make it bold, and let me know if that helps you or not. All right, so we'll bring it down, and I think you guys can still see it if we do it like this. I'll just space it out a little. So I typically prefer to eat foods that are very salty and maybe even savory. Again, we have salty here is also a great choice because Y as a modifier, for some reason, does not get used very often at all. It's kind of like typically how we just don't see it as much as we could be seeing it in our sentences. So this is good. Almost any word in the English language could be modified by a Y, and it's very interesting. So thank you. And so we have like salty, meaty. It's also, we could say, we have this modifier ish. Oh no, come back. Dun, dun, dun. Bump you up to 20, make it bold. There we go. Ish can also be used as a modifier. And so for this one, it's going to describe usually what things look like. And the first one that popped up into my head was, for example, yeah, there we go. Green-ish, right? And so green-ish just is describing the way the food looks. We don't often want to eat food that looks greenish unless it's a vegetable. But if that's it, then we could say reddish, right? And then you also have pinkish, any color, honestly, yellowish. All of these are modifiers with ish, and it shows that you understand the English language and that you can use it well. However, we need to talk about ish just a little bit here, because if you use ish too much, it's going to lower how formal you are in the exam. So for example, for an IELTS exam, there's a level of formality that is expected from the candidate. So you need to be presenting yourself in a bit of a professional almost manner. So sometimes there would be people who would come on and they would use inappropriate words that you can't use usually outside of maybe with your friends. And that will and has lowered scores. I would highly recommend, if you're going to use inappropriate language or less formal language, use it once and then stop. and switch back to using a bit higher level language than some inappropriate word choices. So that would be my only warning with something like ish, is the fact that it's a little less formal, right? But it's okay. So we have this. The question was here. Make it bold. I'll make it a 20 for you, right? So the question was, what kind of snacks do you like? What kind of snacks would you choose? I typically prefer to eat snacks that are very salty and maybe even savory. And then, right? However, because I am on a diet, I am now trying to avoid such foods. Boom, right? Here we have some different types of referencing. So if you are able to use this type of referencing, I believe it's called anaphoric referencing, but I would need to double check to be 100% certain, and you don't really need to know that because it's an annoying grammar thing that teachers usually have to use. So I'm now trying to avoid such foods, right? Notice, we could have repeated what we said. I'm trying to avoid salty and savory foods. But by avoiding that repetition, you're actually making yourself sound like you have a better command of English, all right? So instead of saying, oh, I really prefer very salty and maybe even savory foods, however, I don't eat salty and savory foods now, you hear that repetition to a native speaker, that sounds not great, all right? It makes us go, you just said that, why are you repeating it? And we don't like it. It's not pretty in our ears, if that makes sense. So instead, what we want to say is something that refers back to what we said. So instead, we're going to say something like, I try to avoid such foods. Such foods means salty and savory food. This is great, all right? If you're interested, I can, in another live stream, try to introduce some different ways to refer back to things. Just let me know in the comments and I'll make a note of it for future reference. All right. Now, this is a great answer. Honestly, we have some great word choices. We have a good adverb of frequency. We have a different word than like or enjoy. And then we come down here and we have however, comma, because I'm on a diet, comma, I am now trying to avoid such foods. This complex sentence, love it. Okay. You need complex sentence structures to let someone who is potentially grading your speaking skills know that you're doing well and that you understand the language at a higher level. So this would be a fantastic answer. If I heard this in part 1 when I was an examiner, I would immediately be thinking to myself, this is fantastic. We're going to hear some good things in part 2 and part 3. And that's what you want. Because if you're just giving an answer that is, I'm going to delete this, that is more online, like, that is more like, I like foods with a lot of meat, right? If you're saying this instead, an examiner is gonna be kind of like, okay, well, that's good. You answered the question, but it's not great, right? And also, sometimes, I'll be really honest, we get bored because we hear answers like this all the time. So we'll hear that answer and we'll go, oh, okay, I just scored something like this a minute ago, right? So we don't want to be doing that too often. Instead, we want more complex answers. And to get more complex answers, you're going to want to use more complex sentence structures, and you're going to want to use them accurately, right? Now, let's take a look at this one. Now, for this, we are now talking about parents. And did your parents let you eat a lot of snacks as a child? Were you allowed to eat a lot of snacks as a child? Notice, this is past tense. Past tense is great, but it is specifically on an exam to see if you know past tense and if you can speak in past tense. So, what we want to do is we want to meet this challenge with our heads held high. All right. So, did your parents let you eat a lot of snacks as a child? Usually, I'll hear something like, my parents let me eat snacks. Not often. I would say that's something I've heard before. So we have some problems here. And some of the problems we have are, first, let's start with let, right? My parents let me eat snacks not often. My parents let me eat snacks not often. That sounds more present than it does past. So we need to add something here. Let's take this one, did, right? And it's going to be in the negative, we know, because there's not here in the original answer. So we're going to change this to didn't. My parents didn't let me eat snacks not often? My parents didn't let me eat snacks often. We move the not here, right? So we don't need the negative there. And this is usually how our sentence structure is going to be when we're answering a question with a sentence and not another question or an imperative. So we have, my parents didn't let me eat snacks often. This is in the past tense, and it matches the sentence structure here that was also in past tense. Great. But is it enough? And the answer, if you ever wonder in an exam where someone's going to interrupt you when they need to move on, the answer is always it's not enough. Because if they're interrupting you, that means all that time up until when they would interrupt you is yours, and you get to talk to your heart's content as long as it's on topic, okay? So instead, my parents didn't let me eat snacks often. They were always concerned that I would get, I'll give you something that I always hear, that I would hurt my teeth. Okay? So what I want to look at here is I would hurt my teeth. So eating snacks doesn't hurt your teeth. Eating chocolate doesn't necessarily hurt your teeth. That's not specific enough. We have a way of saying this in English, and instead what you're going to say is that I would get cavities, right? So a cavity, cavity, there we go. Wait. No. Yeah, okay. I was right before. Sorry. So a cavity is a hole that starts in your teeth because you ate too many sweet foods, right? Usually, you have a cavity. If you see it, it's usually a black spot, right? That starts on your teeth, and when you brush your teeth, it doesn't move. It doesn't go anywhere, and it kind of hurts, right? So it is painful, and this is what your parents are hoping to avoid. When you were a child, they were hoping you wouldn't get cavities. So my parents didn't let me eat snacks often. They were always concerned that I would get cavities. I like this word concerned because the word I'm used to hearing is worried, right? Or scared. Instead, let's use a bigger word, a better word, but bigger is not always better in the world of words, okay? However, in this case, it is. So they were always concerned that I would get cavities, right? This is great. Even though we used the word often here, it's okay because we have a lot of in the question. They didn't say, did your parents often let you eat snacks as a child, right? They said a lot of snacks, which means the synonym for a lot of in this case is going to be often. And that's the adverb of frequency that we're going to use here. It's still perfectly fine. It's great. It lets us understand that you're not just repeating what we said, right? So for example, an answer that I would hear in response to this might be something like, No, my parents didn't let me eat a lot of snacks as a child, right? Notice this, a lot of snacks as a child. A lot of snacks as a child. It's the same. And we want to avoid things that are the same in our answers to the questions, all right? So we need to be just a bit more particular or careful in the way that we respond to things. We don't want to just be repeating the same thing back. If we're repeating the same things back, then it seems like maybe you don't have the grammatical knowledge or the lexical knowledge to create a answer with more synonyms than just repeating what was said to you, right? So I would avoid this. Let's get rid of it. We don't like it. Let's not use it, right? Now, I think we're okay here, right? We have cavity. It's kind of a bit, I think. It's a lot of stuff. Let's go and let's take a look at this one, right? Are snacks always healthy? I think we know the answer to this, right? So make it bold. Are snacks always healthy? Are snacks always unhealthy? Okay. Now, what I'll hear in response to this is sometimes candidates and or students will say something like snacks are not health, right? And or they'll say something similar to this, and what they're doing is they've taken the why and they've killed it. And we need the why here because health is to talk about your health, right? How sick or not sick you are. So we could say something like snacks are not good for my health, right? This would be fine, right? Now, sometimes I get also body health, and I'm not sure why body health comes up, but no, let's just say snacks are not good for my health, which is equal to snacks are not healthy. However, let's just look at these two sentences. Snacks are not good for my health versus snacks are not healthy. I would much prefer to hear this one because of the idiomatic expression here, good for my health, okay? Good for my health is something that can be said. However, for some reason, again, like so many other things, we're not hearing often. And a lot of people will try to go and they'll grab old-fashioned idiomatic expressions like I was over the moon or I can't think of them now, but things like that, like expressions like this are old, right? And that kind of shows that you've maybe memorized a lot of really old expressions that you're never going to use. And in many cases, they're not used correctly anyway. So get rid of those idiomatic expressions like this and instead choose something that's nicer and easier to understand. Snacks are not good for my health. These words go together often. Instead of looking up idioms, I would look for collocations. And collocations are going to be much easier to use and much easier to understand. And in scoring of things, they typically hold the same amount of value as an idiom, right? So instead of using idioms poorly, use collocations well. Okay? So snacks are not good for my health. Love it. We can use this. So let's kill snacks are not healthy. And this also actually does us another favor if you are someone who is killing the Y in healthy, right? If you find yourself and you're practicing and you're studying and you listen back to what you've said and you hear yourself saying health instead of healthy, maybe make life easier and instead learn an expression like this where you don't have to say healthy. At least not at first, okay? You should still fix that problem. It should still be something you're concerned about and that you go out of your way to practice and perfect. However, if you find yourself short on time and you want to make sure that you can still sound good, say snacks are not good for my health, okay? This is something that can just save you a bit of trouble, all right? So snacks are not good for my health. So, but if we look here, are snacks always healthy? Are snacks always unhealthy? Did they ask about you? I don't see anything that says my or your, anything like that. So instead, here, let's change it. We're going to say snacks are not good for people in general, right? Now, in general means snacks are not good for people, usually, mostly. Snacks are not good for most people. That would still kind of be like this here. It's almost the same. So, but it's very rare that I hear anybody saying in general. So again, live it, love it, want it. All right. So snacks are not good for people in general. That doesn't mean that there are no good. Oh, well, actually, let's change that. We're going to use healthy now. And this is where it might come in handy to practice and perfect that why. Okay. Snacks are there. That doesn't mean there are no healthy snacks. It just means that we should limit the amount of snacking we do. Now, I want us to notice something. Let's look at this word snack, right? So snack is a fantastic word. It is also both a noun and a verb, okay? Now, because it's a noun and a verb, this means we can use it in this way here, snacking. If it has an ing at the end of it, it is typically, but not always, a verb or a gerund, but we're not going to talk about gerunds right now. So it just means that we should limit the amount of the amount of snacking we do, right? Here it is used as a verb, and that's perfectly fine. In fact, if you use the word snack as a verb, that's pretty impressive. Not a lot of people tend to recognize the different forms of the word snack. So do it, right? Why limit yourself to what other people say is the correct answer? And instead, you can always look up different words and see if there are different forms of the word and different ways of using it. Now, that does not mean choose a different definition of the word. It just means choose a different way that the word might be usable. All right? Like in this case, as a noun or a verb. So, snacks, noun, are not good for people in general. That doesn't mean there are no healthy snacks, also a noun, right? It just means that we should limit the amount of snacking, verb, we do. Okay? So that's a good answer. I would be very, very happy with this answer. And notice they said we here, not me, I, right? That's great because we said in general at the beginning of our answer. And in general means we are not talking about ourselves. We are talking about all people, things in general, in a much more all-encompassing way, right? So the we is appropriate. You'll notice in, for example, IELTS Speaking Part 3, they'll say something to the effect of, now I'm going to ask you some questions in general. In general, in Part 3, definitely always means we don't want to hear about you. We want to hear about all people. And what's really impressive, particularly in Part 3, is when someone doesn't just talk about the people of like their friends, their family, and then their country. No, instead, unless it's specifically saying in your country, they talk about people around the world, that's great, because so often people who take exams are limiting themselves and they're only talking about things that they're very familiar with. And if you go outside of that and you're able to answer a question by thinking critically about other cultures, other countries, other things, not just things that pertain directly to you in your life, that's going to be a higher score, 100%. If you're doing it right, it's good, right? So, in general, we, people, not you, okay? Be very careful. Now, let's go ahead and let's go and look at this one. So, we have, and I'm just going to space this down a little bit further so it's not distracting. And bold, make it a bit bigger for you, right? What snacks do people in your country enjoy? What kind of snacks do people in your country like? Enjoy, there we go. Enjoy, like, these are the same, right? You could also use this word prefer. So what kind of snacks do people in your country prefer? That could also be something you hear. It also means the same, right? So I'll just pop it over here for you so that way you can see all the choices. Enjoy, like, prefer, all the same thing, okay? Now, I will say that prefer out of these three choices is the better word choice because it's not as common. It's not uncommon, and it's not rare, I should say. It's not rare, but it is uncommon. So prefer is probably what you want to use if you hear a question that's asking you something you enjoy or like. You could always say, I prefer, right? Something, something, something. But here we're talking about people, where people in your country. So a lot of times people will answer and they'll say, people in my country like blah, 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 right? Notice, remember what I told you before. Don't just repeat what you hear. Instead, say something like, people in China, Switzerland, whatever your country is. I don't know, Ghana, if you want, right? People in these countries, your country. Say your country. Don't just say people in my country, because that's what the person asking you the question said. You want to say something a little different. So we're going to say, because, we're live streaming to China, we're going to do people in China. All right. So are the fonts still too small? Give me 1 second. Let's bump this up. 24. Okay. We'll do this up here. 24. Let's see if that's better for you. I mean, any bigger than that, we're starting to take over a lot of the page. So, what snacks do people in your country enjoy? What kind of snacks do people in your country like or prefer? So, people in China tend to eat, instead of saying like or enjoy or prefer. People in China tend to eat snacks that are spicy, right? We could say this. Okay, this is okay. Notice I used the word I used the collocation tend to. And tend to just means people in China usually eat snacks that are spicy. So let's put tend to here, and in this case, it's going to mean usually. So people in China tend to eat snacks that are spicy. Okay, all right. That's true to your experience, and that's okay, and that's acceptable. And then maybe we could say something even more. People in China tend to eat snacks that are spicy. What about, let's change this a little. Let's make it a bit more detailed. Let's say young people in China tend to eat snacks that are spicy, but let's do it this way. Older people like to eat snacks that have less flavor. Okay? Flavor. Flavor is what something tastes like. What something tastes like. For example, we had that word salty before. Salty is technically a flavor. Spicy, which we just had, is a flavor, right? But this means if they like something with less flavor, we'll just take that and we'll put it down here. Less flavor means a word called bland. Bland. And that's a very American pronunciation of the word bland. I'm sorry. So less flavor equals bland. And bland to a lot of people means boring. It's not spicy. It's not salty. It's just kind of boring. It doesn't have a lot of flavor, right? So here, less flavor is great. I like this. This works well. However, notice we said young people, and now we're saying older people. And this is a good answer already. It's good. But we can still improve this. So instead of saying young people, old people, let's say young people in China tend to eat snacks that are spicy, but older, but the older generations like to eat snacks that have less flavor. Way better, because this means you understand not just the word people, but you understand that there are different ways that we express older or younger people. So young people is a younger generation, and then we have the older generations, which are typically going to be talking about old people. Now, something I want us to be careful of is sometimes instead of hearing old, I hear the word like elder, and that's fine, but we'll never say the elder generations. No. If you want to use the word elder, you need to say something like, we need to respect our elders. This is a very common sentence that people hear quite often when they're talking about the older generations. But if we want to use this when we're talking about snacks, it doesn't really work well. There might be a way to make it work well, but it's still going to sound strange. And in this case, I would not use the word elder unless you're talking about maybe I wouldn't even say like the elders in my family. No, I would say like the older people in my family, my grandparents in my family, things like that. I wouldn't say the elders in my family, because elder also has a second meaning, and the second meaning to elder is kind of like someone who is older, wiser, and in charge of something. And it's just very uncommon these days to hear the word elder used when talking about an all-encompassing or larger amount of people, like a generation, right? So we're not usually going to use that today. I think in the past, maybe, but today, no. In fact, the word elder is a very kind of old-fashioned word. I don't think it's in use by the younger generations now. It's definitely not in use in my generation. I've never once had a friend or family member be like, oh, think about your elders. No, they probably just talk about a specific person, or they would use something like, think about the older people around you, instead of saying elders. Now, that is, of course, only my experience, and that experience is possible to be different for other people who have lived a different life. So we are probably just going to use older generations. Now, I quite like this. If you wanted to use the word bland instead of less flavor, we would change all of this, and let me just I'll take from here and I'll just copy it down to there. And if we wanted to use the word bland, we would probably say older generations like to eat snacks that are bland. Okay? instead of saying that have less flavor. We don't need have with bland, right? Because they'll never go together. So instead we have are bland, foods that are bland, right? Both are good. Bland is another word that is for some reason very underused. So feel free to try it out. And then less flavor is a collocation, which is underused. I think personally, I would prefer to hear less flavor because of the V sound. Because something that I was always listening for when doing examinations was the V sound. If the V sounds like W, it's wrong, right? We need to be very careful. This is why there are a lot of questions that say things like vacations or movies, right? We're trying to make sure that we can hear a wide range of phonological features. And the V sound is something that is known across a few different cultures to be hard to pronounce. And we need to make sure that it's being pronounced. So to practice the V sound, oh man. So I think it makes people feel dumb, but what I have found is if you want to do V, right, you're going to bite your lip, and then it needs to vibrate. So to symbol that you're getting that vibration, your lip will tingle, but also you can for me it's fun. Other people think it looks dumb, but whatever. So you can do, right? And you can pretend like you're a flying insect, like a bee, or in some cases, a mosquito. And when you do that, it'll help you make that V sound, right? So flavor, not flavor. No, it sounds kind of like flower too if you say it that way. So it's not right. So again, you're going to hear me say this a lot, I think, in the future as well. Record yourself making sounds, and then listen back and check, maybe use like an audiobook that has a passage that uses these types of sounds. Make sure that you're making the same sounds that the audiobook person is making. Also, you could very easily go to find an online dictionary. And online dictionaries today always have that button you can press so that you can listen to a word. So you can listen to a word, record yourself saying the word, and then listen to your recording compared to the actual recording on the dictionary site. That's also a fantastic way to go about this. Let's do a few more questions. We still have some time. I'm hoping to end around 1:30, and then we'll be back at 8 to talk about foods and meals and things like that. So let's come down here. We got some nice how questions. And let me make it big for you again. Let's go. We'll do 24. We'll make it bold, right? How do you choose what snacks to eat? How do you decide what snacks to eat? Choose and decide are the same. Okay, how do you choose something? How do you decide on something? So here are just two different forms of a question you might encounter. So how do you choose what snacks to eat? So I sometimes like to find snacks that I have seen my friends eating, right? So we could say this. Instead of, again, usually or typically like we had before, let's use something a little different. Or often's another one that's overused. Instead say, I sometimes, right? We all learn sometimes in adverbs of frequency. It's a very common adverb of frequency to see, but I'm not sure why people don't use it more. I think people focus on memorizing maybe set phrases with the word usually, and they don't really focus on using other adverbs of frequency besides usually and often. So in this case, sometimes, even though it's simple, is nice, right? So I sometimes like to find snacks that I have seen my friends eating. Notice have seen. This is also a great sentence structure. Typically, I'll see something that like they say, I saw, or sometimes they don't know the past options at all. And it'll be like, I see my friends eating. And in this case, use have seen. It's better. It's a bit more complex. It's going to make you look good. All right. So I sometimes like to find snacks that I have seen my friends eating. Fantastic. But have we really answered the question? No, mostly, but it's pretty short still. And so let's add to it. I sometimes like to find snacks that I've seen my friends eating. One time, so we'll give an anecdote, right? One time I bought some wasabi peanuts that my best friend, one time I bought some wasabi peanuts that my best friend, well, no, I wouldn't say best friend. One time I bought some wasabi peanuts that I saw a person on campus eating. That was a huge mistake. Okay? This is good. Complex sentence structure forever. All right? So one time I bought some wasabi peanuts. Wasabi, nobody ever really says wasabi. Wasabi is that flavor of green stuff that's used usually when you have sushi. And it's super spicy. It's like a mustard that like your nose will start to run. Very, very spicy. And so, of course, peanuts are like the little nuts that you can eat. Wasabi peanuts are a snack. They're very common to see people eating, but especially in like the US. In the US, they love spicy stuff. Not painful. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. They like the spicy things that are painful, right? And so you'll see people in the US eating a lot of wasabi peanuts. So one time I bought some wasabi peanuts that I saw a person on campus. On campus means at school, right? And it's specifically at school for university. All right. So if you are a university student, this is fine. If you went to university in the past, this is great. If you are under 18, say at school. Don't say on campus. Say at school. It'll be better. It'll go over easier with the examiner, and the examiner doesn't have to wonder, oh, is this a memorized answer? What can I do with this? And instead just say at school, done, no questions asked. It's great, right? And then we got our little semicolon here. He's going to make this a little bit more of a complex sentence. It's great. It's fantastic. And then if you're able to, that was a huge mistake. Notice we have this exclamation point here. So if you put the stress on huge, that was a huge mistake, right? Huge. Then that's showing that you have some word stress that you're able to use well and accurately. And that's another great thing to do on something like a speaking exam. Okay? Do that. So this would be a good answer. I would like to hear this answer. Yeah. And it shows an example of how you choose or decide on snacks to eat. So it answers the question well. Sometimes, though, you might have somebody who says, I choose sweet snacks, right? And just look at the difference here. I choose sweet snacks versus I sometimes like to find snacks that I've seen my friends eating. Even if we said I sometimes like to find snacks that are sweet, that would still be better than I choose sweet snacks, right? I choose sweet snacks maybe because I really like sweetie things. I've heard this way too much. I'm very confused as to where this came from, because if we have something that's like sweetie is going to be what you call someone, and it's a term of endearment usually. So sweetie equals term of endearment. And a term of endearment is like a way to talk to or about a husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, right? GF, BF, husband, wife, usually, okay? So it's kind of strange to me. And in that case, it would be spelled like this, actually. All right. But when people are saying it, it's like they're adding the Y modifier to sweet. And we won't add the Y modifier to sweet, actually. Instead, we add the Y modifier to, we add the ish to sweet. So sweet-ish things would be much better. We could say Swedish things, which sounds a lot like Swedish, like the people in Sweden. But, all right, sweet-ish things would be fine. It would, of course, still be a little less formal, but not angry at it, all right? But never sweetie things. Ugh. It's kind of, when I hear it, I always go, I don't really like that. All right, so instead choose like, I really like sweet things. I like Swedish things. And in fact, I don't really want to use sweet too often because we already had it here. So I really like sugary foods, or yeah, we'll say foods because we have snacks already up here. So instead we change that to foods. We change sweet to sugary. Notice we can use the Y modifier for sugar. And I choose sweet foods because I really like sugar. I choose sweet snacks because I really like sugary foods. This is okay. I don't like it. It's still not better than this. This answer is much better than anything that's like this. And notice, like, sweet snacks is the same as sugary foods. You are using synonyms, and that's good. That's great. But if I were to kind of think about it while entering in a score, for example, I might go, they weren't really able to tell me much that was kind of different from what they had already said. So I would just pay attention to this, and I would be a bit wary or cautious of things like this, and I would instead choose something a bit more detailed, right? Like this one is. Okay. Now let's come and let's look at, oh cool, we might get through all the questions. That'll be nice. When do you usually eat snacks? What time of day do you usually eat snacks? Now this one is fun. 20 bold. Actually, no, let me make it 24. Some people were saying it was too small before. All right. So when do you usually eat snacks? What time of day do you usually eat snacks? Because the question already has usually, we're not going to use it in our answer. So instead, let's first take a look at times of day, right? So a time of day, really basic, morning, afternoon. There isn't, like, you could say at noon, but noon is just 12. And like, so, I would just do afternoon. And then evening, right? And then sometimes people like to say midnight, okay? Now, there is a term here called a midnight snack. Let me pull that up. All right, a midnight snack, which is a snack eaten late at night, right? This is a nice idiomatic expression. It's great to use. Nobody ever uses it. Use it, right? So let's take a look at using a midnight snack in our answer. So when do you usually eat snacks? What time of day do you usually eat snacks? Let's say something like, instead of usually, and we used typically in an answer before, so I'm going to go with normally. I normally, and in fact, maybe not normally, because that would be too much. Occasionally, I like to eat a midnight snack. Is that right? Let's see. Occasionally I like to eat a midnight snack. Kind of. Usually it's going to be used like, I like a good midnight snack, right? And this would be like saying you like a nice late night snack. Now, if we do this, occasionally I eat a midnight snack. This is also okay. This sounds a little bit better, I think, personally. So occasionally I eat a midnight snack. I know it's not, actually, let's try, I know it's unhealthy for me. We're not going to say unhealthy for my body. No, unnecessary. It's unhealthy for me. Me includes your body, right? So I know it's unhealthy for me, but I just can't stop, right? So, but I just can't stop. Okay, so again, we have an exclamation point. I know it's unhealthy for me, but I just can't stop. We're going to put more stress on these three words. I would probably put the most stress on, but I just can't stop. I'd put the most stress on can't, okay? So this would be nice. This is a nice answer, but we could probably have some time to keep going if we're able to speak a bit more fluently. So let's add to it. Occasionally, I eat a midnight snack. I know it's unhealthy for me, but I just can't stop. Most of the time, I go for the leftovers from dinner earlier in the day, right? Now, this probably isn't going to be an answer a lot of people will choose because a lot of people, for some reason, don't like leftovers. And so they might change this to something like, most of the time, I go for whatever chocolate is in the house. Okay, and then we'll get rid of earlier in the day. So most of the time, I go for whatever chocolate is in the house, right? This is great because we're using whatever in a different way. And again, whatever is one of those words that we're not hearing very often. You'll hear it commonly used in, for example, American TV shows. Teenage girls will say, whatever, right? And that means something very different. That means, I heard what you said and I don't care. But here it means any, right? I go for any chocolate in the house, right? So most of the time I go for whatever chocolate is in the house. And let's change, I'll add it here, whatever, as any in this case, okay? So this would be a great answer as well because of the use of whatever as any. And then we, of course, have the stress that you can put on can't here. That's really good. Most of the time is another great idiomatic phrase that we can use. Whatever chocolate is in the house. If you say in the house here, it's okay if you live in an apartment. It still just kind of means the same thing. We're not going to say whatever chocolate is in the apartment. Typically, you could. But if you just say whatever chocolate is in the house is another type of phrase that is pretty common in the English language. So it's understood that even if you don't live in a house per se, this is fine to use. Right? So I think, yeah, that would be a good answer. And let's say, for example, you're stopped and interrupted in your answer here. After I just can't stop, you've still shown something in this answer that is really good. You've used occasionally as an adverb of frequency to begin a sentence. You've chosen a midnight snack, which is an idiomatic phrase. I know it's unhealthy for me. This is a great opportunity to show off your pronunciation of TH and that you understand that the Y sound needs to be made here, right? But I just can't stop, and that gets you into word stress, and that would be good. I would be very pleased, even if you're stopped there, don't stress out. You've shown a lot of things that are very positive to see in an answer. So that would be fantastic, right? Now, let's come down here. Let's just do the last question really quickly. And Are all snacks junk food? And I feel like we know the answer to this, right? So are all snacks junk food? I'll make it bigger, right? Are all snacks junk food? Of course not. However, in this case, we're not just going to go, of course not. No. That's just not enough. Let's instead make a case, right? So junk food here means food like, let me give ourselves some more room. So junk food is, for example, fast food like hamburgers, French fries, or chips if you prefer. French fries. Junk food also includes other foods like just regular chips or crisps, if you like the UK way of doing things. Let's see, chocolate is a junk food. Ice cream is considered a junk food, right? So it's really any food that is bad for you, right? So are all snacks junk food? Well, earlier we were saying that dried fruit can be a snack. Dried fruit does have a lot of sugar, but it would not be considered junk food. So if we come up, we could say something like, of course not, like we had earlier, right? Of course not. There are snacks like dried fruit that are good for you, right? Let's take a look. You didn't just say something about yourself. Instead, you said for you. And in this case, for you does not mean for the person you're talking to, but means for everyone, okay? So, of course not. There are snacks like dried fruit. Notice you said like dried fruit to give an example. Instead of saying, for example, dried fruit, all the time, people will say, for example, right? You have to be able to use other ways to give examples than saying, for example, all right? So this is nice, simple, and easy. Now, one warning with the word like. Specifically in American English, especially like American teenagers, and if we wanted to get very specific, teenage girls, they'll use the word like all the time. And for that, it would be like, of course not. There are like snacks like dried fruit that like are good like for you. And that's using like way too much and using it incorrectly, right? A lot of people will come through and they'll use certain words similar to like, similar in the way that like is used in this case, as teenage girls like to do it. And this can be, you know, right, really. Oh, man, sometimes it's just a noise that people will make. They'll go, and they're kind of using it in the same way that teenage girls use like, and that is considered a pause filler. And it's just buying you time as you think of the next thing to say. Even if it's not actually being used by you to buy time, that is how it is seen. Okay, so we cannot be using it that way because that is not how a true fluent adult is going to typically use the language. Now, of course, if you were a teenager that was American, that might be something you do. However, in this case, especially on IELTS, that's not going to help your score. You need to be careful. So instead, use it as it is used here to provide an example for something without having to use the phrase, for example. Now, of course not. There are snacks like dried fruit that are good for you. It's nice. I like it. Let's make it bigger, right? I think that the problem with snacks is that most people don't want to eat a healthy snack. They want something That is either let's choose this one, a bit more savory or sweet. Okay? And in this case, you've done a few things here. Notice this sentence is quite long. It's a bit more complex. We got this comma, but also a bit more. A bit more is something that I think people try to avoid, or maybe they're not learning about, but a bit more is just another way of saying a little. And it's perfectly fine. I would worry about the fact that it's a little less formal. However, if you're not using it too much, I think it should be fine. So here also, we're showing that we can think about more than just ourselves in another language. We're able to think about other people too. And this is kind of a critical thinking skill as well, right? Because I think that the problem with snacks is that most people don't want this, right? They don't want a healthy snack. So this is fine. It's showing great things. However, we have snacks and snacks and snacks. I think that the problem with snacks is that most people don't want to eat something healthy. This is probably how I would change that. We get rid of at least one of those snack words and we change it to something else. And then something healthy, something is referring back to snacks. We know we're talking about snacks. The context is there. So in this case, it's perfectly fine. Okay. So I think this would be a perfectly acceptable answer that we could have. Now, if you would like to see this video again, let me go ahead while I'm up here, I'll just make this a little bit bigger for everyone and bold it as well. So just in case you missed the beginning, these are some of the things we went over and you can read it while I finish up the video. So we are going to have this recorded. It's been recording. You can check out the recording on any of our internet platforms that you can find us on, like Bilibili or Weibo, and it's always there for you. You can check it out. We are going to have things like pronunciation type videos out. I think probably by the end of this month, you'll be able to find them. But we're still working on it for you guys. So it's a work in progress. However, I will be back here at 8 p.m. So let me put that here. So, I'll be back at 8 p.m. tonight to talk about foods and meals. Okay? This is going to be a bit more about... This is going to be about part 2 of IELTS more than anything else. Remember, today was more about part 1 and some questions you might have in part 1. So for this tonight, we're going to be talking about longer turns, okay? It should be good. Should be informative, hopefully. All right, so outside of that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you go and have a good day. Enjoy your time. Goodbye.